Hi, everyone. It's just after 2 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining our panel today. My name is Tara Andringa, and I'm the Executive Director of PAVE. And we have two panelists with us today, Luke Stedke and Rich Granger from DriveOhio. We're doing something slightly different today. When PAVE first launched, which was about 2.5 years ago, obviously our mission was to have a conversation with the public about autonomous vehicles, to talk about their technology and their societal impacts. And one of the key audiences we always knew we would want to talk to are public sector officials. When we talk to people from cities and communities across the country, what we hear is they want to be getting their communities ready for an eventual AV future, but often don't even know where to begin. They're thinking about things like infrastructure and law enforcement and how do they help their communities to get ready. So we started talking about how we can have that dialogue with public sector officials, and we sent around a questionnaire to a bunch of public sector folks asking what kind of information would be helpful to you. And these people from Ohio sent back just really thoughtful ideas and plans and questions, and we're really excited to have that conversation. So we started talking to them, and it became a 2-day workshop, which we just did this week on Monday and Tuesday. And so wanted to have Luke and Rich join us to talk about what happened in the workshop, why the public sector is an important audience, and the cool stuff going on in Ohio. So welcome both of you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
So just first wanted to start with what makes Ohio interested in this. I know your Lieutenant Governor, who joined us for our workshop briefly yesterday to give some remarks, has been a real pioneer. What makes Ohio interested in AV technology? Rich, do you want to start?
Sure. Yeah, well, thanks, Tara, for having us, and thanks again for the last 2 days. It's been a lot of fun working together on this. So when we think about smart mobility, which is DriveOhio's focus on behalf of the Ohio Department of Transportation, on behalf of the whole state of Ohio, we see it impacting multiple sectors that drive Ohio's economy into the future. So that includes automotive, of course, logistics for the movement of goods, and even aerospace, because we're looking at the impact of this convergence of several overlapping technology trends: automated, connected, electric, on the ground and in the air. So it's really, if we're going to make sure that Ohio's economy is moving at full speed for the 21st century, we have no choice but to embrace these technologies, not just be ready for them, but proactively, re-engineer our supply chain and our economy around this. And when you mentioned the Lieutenant Governor, his portfolio is very interesting. It's got a recurring theme of innovation and government delivery, working in collaboration with industry and education partners. And some of the initiatives that he's directly overseeing include the Innovate Ohio initiative, the Broadband Ohio initiative, which is yet another trend of connectivity and all that, which, by the way, Broadband Ohio is staffed by 2 former DriveOhio staff members. So, what a perfect analogy of the overlap. And even the Office of Workforce Transformation is in his very large portfolio. It's got like 5 jobs or something. So that's been the perspective. And Luke, I don't know what you'd like to add to that.
No, Rich, as always, you did a really good job of answering that question. Tara mentioned, DriveOhio is a part of the Ohio Department of Transportation, and Rich mentioned it as well. Safety, right? Safety is of paramount importance to all of this work, and also just the economic impact of it. The DeWine Husted administration has been crystal clear about utilizing technology to improve the lives of all Ohioans, and also utilizing technology to secure that 21st century economy. We want to make sure that Ohio's workforce can compete in a global economy.
And speaking of which, one of the things that we thought on the PAVE staff that was so cool about Ohio was the diversity of the projects you all are working on, from urban AV projects to rural AV projects and highway trucking projects. Can you just give an overview of some of the AV deployments and projects you're working on in Ohio?
Sure. Yeah, so I'll list off a few, and of course, Luke, feel free to add what I missed. So for AV automated shuttles for the movement of people, we've had 2 deployments in Columbus. The Smart Circuit Shuttle was the first, and the Linden Leap was in the Linden community in the northeast side of Columbus. While both of those have wrapped up, a lot of the lessons that came out of that will feed into the next round. We have federal funding for a deployment in Youngstown through the Smart 2 project that's both streetscape improvements and shuttle deployment. So that's sort of that was some of the early work. We've got live deployments with Starship up at Bowling Green. The millionth delivery from Starship actually happened in Ohio at Bowling Green, so that was really cool. It started off on the Bowling Green State University campus and has now expanded into the city of Bowling Green. And for those that aren't familiar with Starship, we're talking about sidewalk delivery robots that are very, their videos showing the kids talking to the robots are one of my favorite parts. We've got Thor Drive that relocated from Silicon Valley down to Cincinnati, working on, currently focused on airport applications. So inside a more closed environment for that operational domain. So looking at airport logistics there. You mentioned rural settings. We've got the Automated Driving Systems grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation in Southeast Ohio, looking at rural deployments of AVs where the roads may be full of gravel and lots of hills and different terrain, and how the AVs handle that. We've got the I-70 truck automation corridor connecting Columbus, Dayton, and Indianapolis, looking at truck automation deployments over the next 4 years, another federal grant for a different group at US DOT. We've got planning activities in Lordstown for a smart logistics hub, looking at yard automation and all that. And then we've got the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor in Central Ohio, which is adjacent to the Transportation Research Center, which was another key partner on this past 2 days. And so if you have closed track testing at TRC, you have the option to go out on a 35-mile stretch of US 33 to do additional testing. Luke, anything you'd like to add on that?
I was just gonna, in Ohio, I'm sure people are tired of us talking about in the air as well, but we really see it as a differentiator, and Rich touched on it, the overlapping technology silos that had been siloed that are just naturally merging into a new transportation system. So we've got Agility Prime out of Springfield, Ohio, and then also we were awarded this week as part of NASA's national campaign about developing advanced air mobility here in the state. But Rich touched on the TRC and just the amount of work that's going on there. It really is an asset unlike any other in the United States. You know, currently they've got Waymo testing out their Locomation. You know, as we speak, a level 2 truck in deployment is coming from California to the TRC with Plus AI. So it really is, it's day by day and week by week, this activity is happening right here in the Buckeye State.
It's so great to see all the different projects you guys are working on. And then what made you interested in doing this workshop the last 2 days? What was appealing about that to you?
I'll take that first. You know, just honestly, the network and the team that you have at PAVE, Tara, it was, for our perspective, it's really, it's a maturation process, and the ability to partner with you guys for a 2-day event that really is, you know, we talk about, whenever we're talking about autonomous vehicles, trust is a big part of it. And for us to be able to utilize the shared knowledge of your partners and your team, it was a no-brainer. We see it as a feather in our cap for sure.
Well, and we were thrilled to work with you.
For sure, yeah. And what I would maybe add to that is we have this collaboration model. We call it the DriveOhio Alliance, and if you have a single meeting with us, you're in. So it's that easy, right? And so it's industry, it's education, it's government, communities. And you know, back in the before times, we would all get together in person and have, you know, meetings and networking, and you know, we've done our best in this virtual setting. So this was a chance to get that band back together, so to speak, but to go much deeper than we've even been able to go in some of our other events, and bring, as Luke said, you know, the PAVE network is just fantastic. And really, it's just a chance to get ourselves out of our own bubble, because sometimes we'll talk to ourselves and we do our best to talk to others, but sometimes it's hard to paint that full picture. And so taking really 2 days to paint that full picture was helpful for us, and hopefully for the audience too.
When speaking of the AV Alliance, that was going to be a question I wanted to talk about, is who was in the audience? Can you talk about who this workshop was for?
Sure. I mean, we reached out to a wide variety of, we've got this mailing list we use for that DriveOhio Alliance that pulls in staff from the Ohio Department of Transportation, all the metropolitan planning organizations around the state, both in urban and rural and suburban areas. city and county engineers. We've got this Ohio Local Technical Assistance Program, of course, industry partners, university. I'm not sure if we quite got into the K-12 audience, but they're definitely in our network, and we talk with them. And there were other state DOTs. I know other PAVE members and advisors were listening, which was awesome. Adjacent states, we work with all of our adjacent states, so we know we had representation there. Luke, who did I miss?
Well, just from the state perspective, different, our partner organizations within the state. And then also the other piece that's really important are regulators and legislators, right? Like the ability to expose them and educate them on what the technology is, where it is, what it is doing now, and what it's not doing now. So I think that the education piece is just so important. Yeah, it can't be overstated.
Absolutely. And then, when you have this audience, curious, what are the types of things, and I know this is a complicated question, but what are the types of things you feel like people are looking for? Like, what's the information the Alliance is needing, and what is, how is this workshop useful?
Yeah, I'm sure Rich is the same way. The one question, like, it's almost like a daily basis, is when is this going to happen? Tell me a date, right? Like we're going to circle it on like May 4th, 2022. When, how, what are, we talk a lot about partnerships, a lot of, especially with the local communities. Sarah, you mentioned it, they don't know where to start. They don't know how to, what data is valuable, what data is not valuable. They don't know how to start a conversation. They may know, everybody's got technical expertise on traditional transportation topics, but not everybody has a utility belt of skill sets that can be brought to bear on some of these really multimodal, multi-technology challenges. Rich, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, what I would maybe add to that is if you were to categorize the types of questions that come in, sometimes it's about technology. What is it? How does it work? Who are the key industry players? And of course, as Luke said, when, that's a big one. But also use cases. So how can these AVs help with moving of people or goods? And then business models. How do we pay for all this? Funding pilots through grants seems fairly obvious and low-hanging fruit when you can win it. But then how do you sustainably deploy it? What happens when the grant is over? Or what if how does industry see it? How does the public sector see it? And those are a lot of the types of things we hear.
Yep. Go ahead, Luke.
Well, I was just going to say, when we talk to communities, it's what, define a challenge. Like, what is a challenge for your system, to kind of wrap their mind around. And then from the industry side, it's use cases, right? Like if you can if you have those two answers, you're a long way to getting a solution.
Yep. Okay, and I'm not going to recount the whole workshop, but for the audience's purpose, we divided it into 6 kind of modules or sessions. We did a AV Tech 101, we did a session on policy and regulation, we did a section on mobility and community values, one on moving goods, one on moving people, and then the last one we talked about kind of bringing it all together, talked about infrastructure and law enforcement and transit. Just wanted to kind of ask you guys, what were your main takeaways? What did you find the most useful? What surprised you? Kind of what were your thoughts about the sessions?
The main takeaway is we've got a lot of resources to bring to bear to these questions, right? Like the networks that we can bring to answer these questions is quite substantive. I really enjoyed Ed's panel yesterday, just to get that perspective, because our perspective as infrastructure owners and operators is we need to help in every way we can, and how best to crack that nut. But you hear from the industry, it's like, well, yes and no, right? Like we are trying to build the best operator thus far for these vehicles. So that type of give and take. The most valuable thing is just the venue itself, the open exchange of ideas. I've had 3 emails in the last hour, just, connections, right? Like law enforcement in California and Colorado reaching out, just the ability to broaden a network and to establish those relationships.
And what I would add is that anytime I heard someone talking that brought a perspective that was different from our teams, which I would categorize as us being public sector, whether it was someone from the education setting or the private sector. I mean, I learned something every time, whether it was hearing, Morgan Kaufman from Columbus Yellow Cab talking about the nuances of running a taxi service in the 21st century, hearing about community perspectives from others, hearing the law enforcement perspective, even though they're more public sector, that's a whole different area of expertise.
Sure.
And we would hope that when the public sector folks were sharing their perspective, that the industry folks learn from each other. That tends to be what really shines for us in these type of events.
Absolutely. And it's so cool to have communities who have kind of been through this talk about lessons learned. One of the law enforcement officials was Saul Jager from the Mountain View Police Department, where they've already had a lot of deployments. And it's interesting, I thought, to hear kind of the things that they've learned and experienced, for sure. We got a few questions from today's audience asking about specific things about how you educate the public sector. One was talking about the importance between distinguishing between ADAS and self-driving cars. Safety features that are available today on cars versus fully self-driving cars that will be presumably available in the future, and how the public sector can educate the public about that. I'm curious if you all have thoughts about that important issue.
Yeah, I think it's really important, especially when it comes, we talk about a lot. So the ability to share a vernacular. You see a lot of architectures when it comes to the current state of adapted advanced driver assist. It's really the ability, we talk a lot about the levels of automation, and that's a very technical concept for our citizens to understand. I think it starts with education. It starts with, venues like this. It starts, in driver education, I think, has a part to play. I think the OEMs, as they are rolling out this technology, I think there is a role that they can play. Ed had mentioned AAA's, and I think Consumer Reports have done some work on this as well, is trying to standardize the terms around this technology. But to really, Terry, we talked a little bit this on Monday, talking in terms of augmenting the human in the loop currently, and where we are right now in the process, and to see how that changes as the technology changes, but to be really clear on where we are right now, vis-a-vis the technology and the human in the vehicle.
For sure.
Yeah. Safety is just number one. It is so important. And I mean, ultimately, this comes down to communication over and over again, almost to the point where people get tired of hearing us say it. That's when you're probably starting to break through.
Exactly.
But I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but when we see it even just in classrooms, I'll talk to kids about it, and of course they always bring a higher level of technical understanding than most of us grown-ups do. But still, it's important to get the message out to all ages, all audiences, and just when you think you're done, you still got work to do. So,
absolutely. And another great question we got from today's audience was about people with disabilities. And obviously, one of the great potential benefits of AVs is to kind of rethink our transportation system and include people who aren't well served by our current system necessarily. And the question is kind of how can public sector officials and entities be ensuring that that's the people with disabilities are better served by our new transportation options? What can the public sector do?
So the first and best thing they can do is talk to people with disabilities and preferably hire them. And so one of our interns is Miss Jen Schlegel from Ohio State University. And, she's one of the most eloquent advocates for all sorts of topics that I've ever met, including this topic, because it personally affects her. And so we listen more than we talk about this subject. And one of the things that Jen has taught us is, don't assume that we're just bolting automation on top of an existing system that works perfectly. It's probably quite the opposite. There are enough accumulated problems in the transportation system for people with disabilities that while automation has great potential, if some of those underlying issues aren't simultaneously taken care of and maybe even addressed before the automation hits the market, then it's going to be yet another potential missed opportunity. So that's not to say there is not potential. It just means take a nuanced understanding of it. And the best way to do that is to talk to people that experience this every day regularly and give them a seat at the table, whether it's speccing out designs, use cases, all those things.
That's exactly. I actually thought one of the most powerful parts of the workshop was a video that Jen Schlegel had filmed, talking about her own experience and the challenges of mobility for people who can't, have to navigate our current system for sure. Mm-hmm. One more question from the audience, and then I'm going to move on. But that I thought was another interesting question is, obviously we're trying to build trust with the public. And so the question was, what kind of data would be helpful for communities to have to communicate to the public that this is safe, that the technology is safe? Curious what your reaction to that is.
Well, it kind of goes to, we were talking about how do communities look at the challenges in transportation, excuse me. It would start there, right? Like to utilize the data to identify a challenge, and then try through a deployment, through, like Rich said, open communication. I really like what Rich said there about rethinking the design process, because if we already have gaps, like we're talking about new systems here, so why not fix it, right? Like just the design mindset around it is really important. But I would argue that through the underlying data, the place where you start will help inform where you're going when it comes in reference to autonomous vehicles and the value to a local community.
And to put an even sharper point on that, as an example of one of the projects I mentioned earlier, the Automated Driving Systems Grant in Southeast Ohio, we built the word data into the name of our proposal, Deploying Automated Technology Anywhere, because the whole purpose of that ADS grant is to collect data for rulemaking, for research. Just earlier today, we were literally having our latest review of the data management plan for that project. It'll go into a secure data commons. It'll be accessible to researchers for even years after the project. And that's getting a little technical, but it's just, when you go to that next level of questions, there's a whole team of engineers and researchers looking at that right now across the federal, state, and academic environment. So there's some real work going on, and we know there's a great initiative through NHTSA with the AV test initiative that's kind of built to share information openly. So there's a lot of great tools out there. It's just, again, it's that theme of communications. Get the word out there and over communicate.
For sure.
Okay. And I would add that just to have the local leaders be comfortable that not all of these deployments are going to be the same, right? Like every community is unique, and the way you utilize the technology is going to be unique to your own community.
Okay, and you both partly just answered this question, but what are the next steps for Ohio in the AV space? What else? You already have a lot going on. What's coming up? Yeah,
I would say, in Ohio, we use this this phrase. We say, "Come here to test and stay here to grow." That's sort of how we like to see things work. Is it often starts with testing and deployment, whether it's on a closed track at a place like TRC, on an open road like a 33 corridor, or one of our funded projects. So to operationalize that, we feel like we have three things that we're doing all in parallel. One is deliver on these pilots and deployments that we've highlighted that are already funded. So we're going to see those through, whether they're for a year or 4 years or however long those different initiatives go. That's number one. Number two, we want to support growth of the AV industry that's already here, whether that's last mile delivery like Starship and up in Bowling Green. Kroger headquarters is in Cincinnati, and they're working already with Neuro in other states. So we're excited to see some of that coming soon to Ohio, we hope. Middle mile trucking, we've already done some test runs with Locomotion, and we have the I-70 project that'll pull in more and more performers in that space. Working through these logistics hubs, passenger shuttles, and even this interesting idea of the AV supply chain. There's this startup in Dayton called Oculi that has developed this really clever radar solution that takes existing off-the-shelf radar, puts a software layer on top of it, and makes it as good as LiDAR, but maybe not as expensive. And I'm probably butchering their value proposition, but it's fascinating what they're doing. And it's just one example of this whole supply chain that's growing around AVs. And guess what Ohio's economy is currently built on? It's the automotive supply chain and the aerospace supply chain. And so, it's not just the vehicle itself. It's not just the software stack. It's all the hardware. It's all the other stuff that makes this system work. So that's another big area. And then, we're always looking for new relationships, new industry relationships where hopefully we can add some value to those tech companies by connecting them with customers, with funding opportunities, with talent, preferably all of the above. That's really kind of what we're focused on over the next several years.
Great. So obviously you held this workshop. What are other things that can be done to help communities prepare for AVs?
I think part of it is on the policy and on the policy front. When you look at, and this is not a critique, the federal government has been very helpful on setting the table with the conversation around autonomous vehicles and with their AV documentation, but they've been silent on code, on standards. So if we can help establish, equipment standards through some of the work with Nick Hegemeyer, and not only connected but automated vehicles, also our our AV pool fund with multiple states. So interoperability is going to be really important. And then also from a code standpoint, we're in an executive order now, but we know in the next 2 to 4 years with the advancement of the technology and the deployments as they scale, we're going to have to, do some work to align our code with the technology. So I think that's an important piece of it as well, to be a resource to kind of connect communities with the industry and kind of foster that conversation around what does the industry need, what does the community need, and how do we solve, how do we come to a resolution that's beneficial to everybody?
Yeah.
I would add to that, just continued multi-state conversations and collaboration, and also at the community level. I mean, that was one of the coolest things in one of the panels yesterday, seeing, law enforcement from Mountain View that's been doing this for 10 years. We've got some communities in Ohio that have been going at this for, I don't know, 2 to 4 years maybe. And then you've got other communities that are just coming to the table. So there's always something to learn. There's always somebody who's done more and seen more than we have. And there's great organizations like AASHTO. Of course, the PAVE Public Sector Advisory Council is a tremendous resource for everybody to just keep sharing information, because that's just, it's good government when you're not reinventing things and you can learn from others. It's a good way to go.
For sure. And on that note, if other states are planning on hosting workshops like this, what advice do you have for them? Are there lessons learned or things you do differently, or?
Partner with PAVE, first of all.
Great answer, Luke.
I would say, like Rich, we've talked about it this entire half hour, utilize your networks, utilize your partnerships, don't be afraid to say, I don't know, right? Don't be afraid to not have the expert in your organization or in your Rolodex, because ultimately, and we've seen this at DriveOhio, not only the merging of the technology, but just the sheer work that it's going to take to scale these systems. It's going to take all of us. So be willing to partner, I guess, would be my overarching idea.
Absolutely. Well, we are just about out of time. So speaking of partnering, I want to just give you both, again, the hugest thanks from PAVE for all you did to make this workshop come together and for your partnership in everything. It's just been an absolute pleasure and delight to work with you, and for all the folks at Ohio. And it is so inspiring to see all the tremendous things going on there.
I couldn't agree more. Tara, Tabitha, Jade, Ed, thank you. Kudos to you guys.
Yeah, huge shout out to the PAVE team. So thank you, and thank you for your time today, and look forward to many more times to work together in the future. And thank you all for joining us, and we will see you next Wednesday at our next PAVE panel. Thank you.
Thank you.